maybe upgrade buildings.
Oh, the family tree.
I don't exactly know, but they are one of those, let's say, builders of the newer civilization and the newer tech.
Yeah, it
They're
seems
shown
like
some of the ironworks.
a decent number of these guys
Oh,
are.
and of course, sorry. Of course, where you have to go is go back on the main page. I almost forgot about this. And then on the left-hand side, you have the fourth option, Internet Weltausstellungen. So these are, of course, from the international world exhibitions. So photos from the world exhibition. So he's tied into that for sure. Yeah.
Wow.
And then, of course, you always have to ask the question: did they build it? Did they already find it and just make a nice drawing and then claimed it? So it's one of those guys.
Hard not to wonder. Yeah, I mean, looking at some of the best architects versus the best designers versus the best managerial theorists, a lot of the time you've got better line producers or line strategists that can see how something works than somebody who designs it. Like you might design something and it's super creative, but then it's, kind of like an Italian coffee machine that's finicky. And then you have a guy who works for Kellogg and he's from Michigan and he just studies people all day, right? So he's in the Kellogg building and he knows how to make your cereal more efficient with less entropy upon the wheat grain slashing. That's a different kind of guy than an inventor. Like an engineer, an inventor, an artist are different. He's not an artist. He's an engineer. So I feel like you're looking at two different things when you see like the artists that come in and explain away what they're looking at and say, oh, we should add some facades to it. I could be wrong, but that's what I've noticed a lot about like the giant fireplaces or like the mantles or some of these archways and everything, that they have the symbolism, but it's so built into practical technology still. Like these could be antennas. And I was going to say really quickly, is that weird, or can you compare that to 5G trees? This doesn't seem that different to me than what we do now with these like 5G trees. Like, except that this is lame,
That is lame.
but this is kind of similar. Yeah.
Yes, before you change that picture again, that one right there, the big arch in the middle and then the two side arches, it seems to be that all of those are actually built in alignment where the main arch is for the solstice or the equinoxes, and then the side arches are for the solstices each year, and that they're all built in this astrological alignments.
Right, and I think that's also is this the help translate for me? Is this because I think that's like a botanical garden, or is that the rotunda? It's the rotunda.
Yeah, rotunda. Yeah, it says rotunda. I'm not even sure if this building still stands because up to this day we have something called the Butterfly House in Zoo Schönbrunn, so in Schönbrunn, and we even technically, I think, have the largest Tartarian castle actually.
I don't want to try to spell Schönbrunn. How do I spell it? I did it. Did I do okay? I was almost there.
Yeah, it seems good.
No,
seems good. Yeah, look at this.
All right.
Look at, now it's showing the butterflies, but
inside the dome, the Viennese dome of butterflies. That's pretty cool.
But you have to see it from the outside to really see what it is.
Yeah, but you gotta see it from the inside to see what it's like. Also, oh my god, these butterflies are eating apples. This is crazy. Wow, they're just like, they look like cat eyes. This is why we have the uncanny valley, because they were worried about butterflies that could fake having a human face biologically. Amazing. Okay, so butterfly Schönbrunn. I definitely didn't spell it right. There's no way that's how it's
that's what it is. Yeah, look at this.
I think I've been here before at some point. Beautiful. There's also like, there you go, right?
Yes.
We have one of these in San Francisco as well. So they're always kind of always the same kind of design. But this is interesting, like the glass wire rooms, because this is like from this period that everything is connects or Tinker Toys, like assemblable, like the Paris Tower. What's it called?
Eiffel Tower.
The Eiffel Tower. I mean, they're the mass manufactured bridges that were made out of. You design it really small and then you replicate scale, right? So you build a little tiny thing, make sure that it works, and then reproduce every part rather largely. So that part I can imagine. I can imagine that was built.
And just because someone's mentioning cheap building, and I know, Bernie, you've made many shows about atmospheric electricity. I just tuned into one of the last ones, and just now I was contacted that supposedly, and I'll check it out closer, there's a guy building like an atmospheric energy device to power your home. And when the thing is, usually, you have those, and then it's like, yeah, sure, it's $20,000, and I heard what one of those devices, like a magnetomotor, it was like 20K or more, and it even had like a GPS tracker in it to like region lock it or something crazy like this. So those things exist, but this guy is selling a device supposedly for like $300. So I'm definitely gonna check it out and see if there's anything behind it. But something else I just talked about to a friend with, and I'd love to know your opinions. We somehow talked about this before, is if it could be that all, let's just call it well-being for the sake of not being censored, maybe to a large extent dependent upon the electrical conductivity of the body. So like how able your own body is, whether it's through minerals that are conductive, through different liquids and so on, to just conduct electricity so that the electrical system within the body is functioning properly. And that would be the requirement for being in a high energy state, being healthy and being happy. And then you look at those buildings, many of them the old ones seem to strengthen that or further that. And all of the new stuff we build is distorting that, I would say, and many of the frequencies we use. What do you think? Bernie, I can't hear you if you want to talk.
You're muted, Bernie.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just talking to Amber. But no, what you're saying is absolutely true. And Dan Winter actually goes quite into detail about how the current metal and glass buildings don't work and destroy the energy fields of the body, where the old ones don't.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Dan Winters, I forget which one his
First
YouTube.
one.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was him.
yeah. Negentropic fractal field. Yeah.
Idea. Yeah, you got him.
Legit. That's based. Yeah, I mean, I think that when we look at you pulled up the iron architecture thing too, and so that kind of that's
so
reminiscent.
Is that really recent or not, or what's going on here?
I mean, well, so fundamentally, it doesn't matter because going back throughout history, that's always the way it's been practiced. You make a small model and then you scale it and you build it. Not everything's been made out of iron before. But we did have like catalytic people that did things before the Bronze Age that are out of metals, and you find metals that are also
before the Bronze Age.
Well, yeah, no, the catalytic is what's it called? Catalytic, whatever that is. Copper Age. I mean, according to mainstream Calco.
Yeah, I was about to say, we're still following that timeline.
Yeah, well, I think that the thing is, you can probably apply that timeline. You just have to like make it in dog years or something,
like a decade.
Yeah, it's like right, but it's still the idea is kind of rhymed to you through mainstream history. It was so long ago that you don't have to worry about it. But, still, they kind of tell you at one point we had a society that used more bronze, than we did. And then another point of society, we use more copper. And wouldn't you know it, it's easier to use bronze, but we use that later. And it's harder to use copper, but we use that earlier. That's kind of the idea of the Latino people, the Ladino, tribes of the Mediterranean that they had access to. Probably something like electricity if they were able to work with copper before the Bronze Age. Well, that kind of rhymes with this idea that in Tartaria, they knew how to use these things. We look at the Turkish Ferris wheel, because originally, what was the name of the Ferris wheel originally? It's called like the Turkish wheel. That was another name. Turkish ups and downs, right? And so the idea that they had a number of metal in France, where did the French get it? They were in Africa. They were following through the Arabic roots where people were using metal, where metal was more commonly used to build things. And ships used a lot more metal at that point. So I think, it's probably just something that the Napoleonic period
Vienna,
Hermetics,
of course, the famous one in Vienna, yeah.
They probably carry, yeah. So it seems like it's clearly a Turkish technology or something that came at least was found through the bazaars, and that's our story that also is kind of mainstreamed. That people found the camera obscura at a Turkish bazaar. Like, of course, all this stuff existed at one point or another, but somebody bought a boombox at a bazaar in the 1600s. And they're like, wow, look what they had back then, or a book about Ferris wheels, a book about architecture, a book about robot designs from India, whatever. What's the Persian roboticist? Arab robot?
Automaton, they would call it back then, right?
Yeah. Ishmael
Yeah,
al-Jazari.
were they called automatons or automatons? Ottoman. The Ottomanatons.
Ottomanatons. Pretty much. So, but you've seen the elephant clock of Jazari, and there's a number of other designs he did. So somebody says, okay, we find a book like this, and then we start building that stuff in France, or in, maybe even better, you're in Austria or Prussia, or again, the Ottoman Empire. And so the Ottomans decide they need some of this stuff. They need a Nileometer or something to know about flood zones. And you're like, why is there a Nileometer in Austria? Well, because there were Arabs, or at least somebody who had access to Arab books and had been hired to do some sort of architecture for the military. So that it spreads. It seems I think that tracks.
Yeah.
But the copper period thing is interesting because the idea that we infer there was kind of a reduction or a degenerate, like a de-evolution of civilization. Right? Like we were better off. We lost some technology and we moved on from there. That's kind of it's kind of like there must have been a plague period or something like that. So it talks about an earlier reset.
I agree, right? Also, could some of the older copper tools have like eroded, or like, I guess there was the ocean rise, saltwater erodes copper as well, and could that be what happened to some of the tools at a certain time period?
I like the idea that the landmass are turtles more and more. I was listening to Discworld a while ago. Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett's based, dude. So this guy also, he lost his mind as he got older. So as he did, he was writing the last of his ideas. He had like dozens of books, and they start out really coherent, and they end actually really, really coherent because he has people helping him finish his last couple books. But there's a couple there in the middle there that are just out of control, and they're also just, I can't believe he got away with that. But did he? Because he's dead. And one of them is he's talking. I mean, all of them they're talking about how you're living on the Discworld, but part of it, there's one that talks about like myths and legends. More specifically, it's not really a story, it's more like a deep dive into, and the idea that the islands, the masses of continents that are moving, they themselves are turtles, is kind of, or some kind of living thing, like living continents, something. Yeah, these things are moving around. Maybe there's some more to it. Maybe there's something more to this, right? Exactly. And some people have said it, and then we just said, okay, that's kind of crazy, or it's a bit woo. But where's the level of truth to it? Because these things are moving. There's things living in them. At what point do we call humanity a thing? At what point do we call the organisms that are making up the soil a thing? And is there something underneath that? And what do we refer to that as? So if these are the moving masses of compost on the back of a turtle or the back of a living thing, that explains also whatever that is, whether it's turtles or not, and that's just the metaphor, but just the idea that these things are moving around and that sometimes they go underwater. Like, how long can they go underwater for and then go back up for? So the moving of continents.
The raising and lowering of the head to breathe, possibly.
Right. I mean, Titan is definitely a more reasonable term. I wonder why they do. What's like the Vedic turtle myth again? The Vedic turtle. Kurma is the second avatar of the Hindu preserver deity Vishnu, originated in the Vedic literature. Check that out. Oh, yeah. Turtle power. That's pretty sweet. And you can't help but notice Kermetics, something like that. I feel like there's something to that, like the wise turtle.
So just because I spoke about this guy with the device, I dropped the link just so everyone can check him out and see if there's anything to it. This guy's name is Wilhelm Mohorn. Maybe we'll even bring him on. I'll get more information on it, but he'll have a presentation soon in Vienna, and then maybe you guys can pick his brain and we can find out, what exactly is going on.
Yeah, let's check out some of his article here. So does he show off his? And this is the guy who makes the machine that's like $300 electricity, or what?
Well, supposedly, maybe that's unofficial or something. I don't know, but at least here, what they talk about in this article apparently is desiccating the walls through room energy. And even for some reason, I don't know if it was from him, but I think I even actually already had heard about such a technique sometime earlier. But here it's mainly about how to get the humidity out of the walls through what is called room energy, and it's in an article. So,
that's interesting. I like it. But he also is looking at energy in all sorts of ways. That's pretty cool.
So, and then also relating back to the whole energy conductivity thing, I sent one more YouTube link. This was a super awesome interview. Oh, this is still his website. And here, who do we have here? We have autodidactic Campbell with
Cam looks so serious right here.
We've got an upcoming one. Campbell's got booked for the three of us. Super looking forward to that. This guy is a legend and the foremost pyramid scientist and researcher in the world, pretty much.
It's awesome.
So I actually was there in 2019, I think. So I checked out the tunnels and spoke with a guide. And aside from the fact that just the environment there is it's super nice, like the whole area, kind of makes you feel good, or at least for me. But what you can really tell is when you're inside the tunnels, it's like super easy to breathe. And this would again go back to the idea of the human body as an electric system, because according to what Dr. Sam said in this interview, all kinds of people get all kinds of benefits and miraculous changes in their body just because there is such a high negative ion concentration within the air inside of those tunnels. And this again would, like I said, go back to this idea that ultimately it's really about the voltage within your body, about electrical conductivity and availability for electrical processes to occur properly. And then, people seem to get healthy. And I really like his approach, that he's invited all kinds of different types of scientists, and of course is not well liked by the Egyptology class because it really smashes their timeline. And this light ray you have out of top, I had even forgotten about this in the meantime, is that he says supposedly there's some kind of a scalar wave coming out of the top of the pyramid, which he even measured. It seems to track along with the sun somewhat. This kind of reminded me of these Tesla balls, where you have this lightning and it's kind of zipping around, but in this case it would be bending towards the sun, right? And the scalar wave technology is also something supposedly used in the Tesla-Lakhovsky multi-wave oscillators or Royal Rife machines and all of that. From what I understand, they also usually use scalar wave. So this is, of course, highly interesting. We would probably have to measure those inside of old world buildings too or something. There's probably something to it. And it would also speak to this idea that we have switched in around 1900 with the whole industrialization and electrification, probably to the worst possible electrical transmission systems available, that are wasteful, that are harmful to the body, and that are just super non-effective and inefficient. And all the efficient ones, including scalar wave, which from what I understand would include the possibility of energy transfer, maybe even lossless information transfer and so on. And this is the part that's been hidden, and we've only been given the belly side of all those technologies. But they were heralded as, oh, now finally we have electricity, right? Or whatever it is. So that's how it appears to me.
Right. We have these ideas of what is normal. It's interesting looking at the electric trolley systems that were in all these cities at one point, because you have to imagine you get a system of, let's go back to like 1800s or the system of these trolleys, wires everywhere. And I was thinking about it the other day because in the original Super Mario Brothers movie, all the cars still work off the electric trolley system. So in Koopa's city, all the cars have these overhead wires that connect to the rail so that when you're driving around, you can connect to the grid and you get your power from the grid above. The police car has the grid, thing here.
Until like 20 years ago, those were still common in Austria, and I think somewhere they still are in Budapest, like with these uplinks, So,
yeah. So, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But now you've got these like wireless systems, you have battery power, you have maybe on the rail or something like that. But the overhead seemed pretty practical because, you just have this thing that's like connecting to it. But it didn't necessarily even need to be connected. I think that's the other point. It's just the fact that it is connected, where it's staying on the rail. But yeah, this is still to this day.
The guiding system, so the driver knows where to go. It's not for power. It's just on a leash,
Yeah, that's kind of what I think is really going on here. But you could easily have an entire grid city. The practicality of that is like once you attach to it, no one else is attached to it. Like if it was wireless, then you'd have a bunch of people getting free electricity. And where would we be then? You'd have people driving their own cars and being happy without paying for gas, right? So, I mean, wireless electricity has been around since before anything. And then they figured out a way of putting it onto a grid they can control.
Attaching a meter to it, yeah.
But what's weird also is you think the Jewish wire over, what's it called? In New York City, in Hell's Kitchen, there's like this wire that goes across, what's it called again?
Oh yeah, and another question. Did you guys know that apparently oxygen is magnetic? Or reacts to magnets?
Yeah, I saw a video recently where they're pouring liquid oxygen through a magnet and it collected a bunch of it and stuck it. It's fascinating stuff. Sorry, I just quickly wanted to interject on Onom in your chat, trying to claim that Sam is a fake and a fraud, and you're 100% wrong. You're ignorant, and you clearly just haven't seen the research. I suggest looking at my many videos on the Bosnian pyramids, which they are, and the geoglyphology science that proves without a shadow of a doubt way too many man-made constructs and built-in features to it and alignments around the world that are included in the sides walls of the mountain.
Yeah, they did try to convince people that the Bosnian pyramid wasn't a pyramid, that it's an exaggeration. I'd like to hear, but if you've got information on Sam specifically or something, if you want to talk to us, go to the Tartary Nova Discord and like talk to us. We're happy to know what you're saying and listen to you. So we'll figure it out.
So did Raphael and that you're listening to right now, and they are. So
Yeah, no, the thing is, and what's really obvious, I mean, you can go there, you can talk to everyone, you can volunteer, and that's, you can even still decide it's wrong or incorrect,
right.
But which kind of excavation site do you even have? This would be a question worldwide, where you can really go yourself, check everything out, and people are happy to have you see everything, and it's not hidden behind 20 arcane scriptures and 30 doctorates.
Yeah.
Even just that approach in itself, I think, shows that this is the right way to go. And they did those measurements apparently, and the negative ion stuff and so on. I mean, and this also with the
Onom, are you in Croatia right now or Bosnia? If you are, hit me up because I'm going to be going there probably at some point. I'm going to be hitting the pyramid up later this year. Hopefully, I'm going to try to bring my dad out there. So happy to check it out more and hear what you have to say about the pyramids. But from everything I've seen, there's a lot of reasons why you'd want people to think this was faked, because then it'd be a lot hard. If it was a UNESCO heritage site, you'd be forced to stop digging. You wouldn't be able to look into things. And so they're well benefited by people thinking they're just kooky Slavs. And it's funny because it's the same patent trick that we've always used. It's just racism. You're like, oh, well, they couldn't possibly have a pyramid in Indonesia. Keep digging. You know what I mean? So the more the idea that Croatians or Bosnians or Serbians like think the other person, Serbs think Croatians can't build pyramids, think Serbs can't build pyramids. That's great. Like the more people think that, like, then the more we can like look into it more. And you're probably going to find it's not just some like levitating flying saucer, but you might also find that it's far more interesting than you think it is, because even if it was somehow pseudo natural, you clearly have for thousands of years people hiding in the mountain.
Okay, I have, sorry, for not exactly following what you said, but I have another idea now.
That's good. Yeah, let's do
So
it.
in terms of, because what you can see is when you walk on top there, and even I kind of halfway fell over this, you have a thin layer of supposedly super advanced concrete on top of this pyramid. Yeah.
Mhm.
And of course, we have to see what kind of concrete this is exactly. I also thought back of the buildings I showed you last time, the supposed 1904 buildings, but also the Gemeindebau buildings, where it's with most of them not so sure when they were built exactly. But many times, as I said, you can see the red brick, and then it's often concreted over. And then, of course, at least with the Roman cement, and I can't properly differentiate all of that, but there's patents going back to 1910 that they like to add hemoglobin to the concrete. Yeah.
Yeah.
So some kind of blood magic, basically. And this is a common way of doing it. And then I was wondering, okay, why? Because I was saying, why would you make this ugly front? Okay, to make the world ugly. Yeah. But maybe these buildings by themselves, like Bernie said, would have, let's say, positive charge, just to simplify it. And by pulling the concrete over them, maybe the effect is lessened, or it's changing or something like this. Because also here with the pyramids, of course, you would wonder who would go there and pour concrete on top of it. Why? Is this maybe like a shielding to disable it? And the same with all the older world buildings in all the inner cities, in every old city that we still have. I don't know. It's just an idea. And then, of course, the whole blood aspect, which always reminds me of Attack on Titan.
There's also seashells, like a lot of stuff.
Seashells?
Yeah.
You mean decorations or?
No, crushed seashells. Crushed, like sometimes fish or crushed seashells are used in making concrete. In Croatia and Rome and that kind of the region there. Like there's everyone's got a secret, by the way. Like my great uncle used to make concrete and like they still can't break it. It's like kind of a claim to fame.
One part that they just discovered with Roman concrete, they before thought it was like mistakes, that there were these chunks of shelled limestone within it, but in fact they've now found that that's actually a method of self healing, self repairing in
and
that
there's
concrete.
kinds of crystal
in, it would then create the chemical reaction again within it and create that geopolymer bond that makes this Roman concrete so strong.
There's a kind of crystal in it. So my great uncle would go to like the harbor at night because he didn't want people to see what he was doing, and he would grab like out of the backs of restaurants when he got to California, or out of the back of like Fisher harbors, like all these shells that were emptied that people had already eaten from and things like that, because he moved inland. And like he would just take tons and tons of seashells and he would crush them up and you put them into the concrete. And it's a major part of it because it has something in it, like a mineral that starts to grow crystal. So then it starts to, and there's like a heat you have to do too, but there's a chemical that makes it hotter. So it gets really hot and then it starts to grow crystal. And then when it dries out, like it's already started to do this thing,
So, but I understand correctly that this type of concrete could even be like self-regenerating, even after it had like a fissure through.
Well, so imagine that like after 1,000 years, it's not concrete anymore. After a certain point, it's crystal. You know what I mean? It's because quartz crystal can grow in it or something like that. Any kind of crystal can help hold the bond together as well. So it can replace the natural material that starts to wear down is replaced with fossilized and splintering out crystal.
Yeah, and that it's a chemical reaction forming the bonds in it. It's not just like setting through sedimentation like our normal shitty concrete today. It's like a geopolymer chemical bond reaction that is on a atomic chemical compound level, forming these much physical bonds.
There's a physical reaction that occurs.
But this type of concrete would be the one with the hemoglobin in it.
Yeah, but also it has seashells.
Sure, but I'm just wondering, like, what is the energy or magic or the field you have to put into it that it actually works? Whether it's maybe about the combination of it,
I think that a part of it might be energy, but just on a very practical level, just blood itself has crystals. So his whole life is
Yeah,
like
but
Narnia.
like with stuff like blood and so on, I always see this even stronger connection to like a higher order organizing field, let's say. So that's why
Right.
I'm wondering, maybe it's important to put that in to like create a certain field, and then in addition with the resources or the seashells, it can organize itself. And then of course I'm thinking of Stellium 7
Yeah.
and the whole idea that, you know, the crystals and so on anyhow are fossilized giant blood, for lack of a better term. So I'm like, what?
I think that's
You
the
know?
thing, is that blood is really practical because a lot of things live and die. And so what do you do with them? And then so if you mash your leftover animal into something and you mix it into something else, you know, you're going to eventually get to a point where you're not eating what's left over if possible. That'll be used as something more practical. Like, you know, you're wearing furs or something like that. And eventually you're mixing the blood into your, you know, fertilizer, right? Have you seen Hemo the Magnificent, which is on the Exertus channel? But the Frank Capra Wonders of Life series, probably my favorite. Hey, look, see, Andreas Exertus is the one that DuckDuckGo finds.
Nice.
For the life of the flesh is
Yes,
in the blood,
yes,
Leviticus
exactly.
17, right? And this is a good one because it's got the voice of Winnie the Pooh here. Like, oh, I don't know, but they're trying to figure out if they can convince people blood's not so terrifying, and they're gonna do this whole cool thing about blood. And then all the animals in the forest meet with Hemo, the Magnificent, and Hemo's like, no, humans can't tell my story. My story is a story of love and of song. That is the story of the blood, you know, the blood that's in the life, you know, and everything. And you humans, they think that blood is this like disgusting, horrible thing, you know. And he's like, no, dude, like humans used to use blood to sacrifice because of the value of blood. You know, humans to this day still value the it goes into like the blood of Christ and everything. It's like, don't worry, we still get the value of blood. We're on the level. And he's like, really? Tell me about it. He just goes into this whole thing about how blood is, you know, what is blood? Blood is life, blood is seawater, you know, the value of how long, you know, we've been putting blood into our soil, you know, when the ancients were learning about the values of blood, tinkering with weird concoctions made of blood to feed the, you know, the sick, right? So
Well, here we also go back to your David Ewing Jr.
letting,
interview, you know, about blood as medicine.
yeah. And it's, I mean, old injected young hemoglobin. We all know this story. So imagine you take young blood and you put it into old people. Shocker, they do better. But what I thought was interesting was old mice injected, no, young mice injected old hemoglobin, and they actually did this to humans too. And they actually got old blood, gave it to young humans after the mouse experiments, and the old blood slowed down and made them age quicker, essentially, and more lethargic, and they were having a harder time with the plasma. So pretty crazy the other direction as well. You know, you could use this, for instance, to inject. You could make an entire population age quicker.
Kind of like what they're doing with GMOs.
Right. Yeah, it's like it works both ways, is the point. Like you can make a mouse that lives longer, but by knowing that, we already know then what it is that's slowing, you know, quickening life's death or aging process. So that's pretty intense. But the other thing is like in synthetic hemoglobin, which they can make from alternative materials than iron. And so that's going to be interesting because they've got these ACS nano synthetic red blood cells. I don't know if this one's made from iron because like they can make it pretty much the same as a normal blood cell, but you could make it out of copper. You could use all sorts of things. So this is a disc shaped cell containing millions of molecules of hemoglobin and iron containing protein that binds oxygen. So if you tried to do hemoglobin titanium, and I think we've mentioned the idea before of like a nano tech. But you'd be able to essentially have, or titanium oxide, there it is, I think, actually. You'd be able to have hemoglobin alternatives that would be just millions of times stronger, more durable. You'd last a lot longer. You wouldn't need to breathe as often. It's just a matter of iron rusts and breaks down really quickly. So the hemoglobin breaks down really quickly. And that's why you look at like blue blood crabs they have a hemoglobin that's made out of copper. So its blood is blue. But also that's what happens when we deoxygenate iron as well, because it loses the rest, because iron turns back to a
And
silver.
also, I think supposedly it happens if you consume too much silver or something.
Right. Well, no.
Oxidized
Okay. So it's
silver.
yeah,
Diatomic.
blue guy silver. So the dude who did it, he I mean, come on, he wanted to be on TV. Let's be real. But and he probably come on, who doesn't want to be blue?
And
Abba-dabba-da.
so
He was like,
monatomic is white silver, diatomic oxidized silver is blue, and obviously they're eating the blue stuff to turn blue.
right, yeah, like it's not silver itself, but it is something to do also with the chemicals involved with the silver that leach the molecule size into skin. It gets trapped like pigment sweat, I guess. So we got trapped the pigment. So eventually, if he stopped taking the stuff, he probably would have like sweated it all out, right? I think is the other thing. So, but I mean, again, he wanted to be Papa Smurf, and I don't blame him. But the titanium blood cells makes the most sense to me, because you get to a point where our hemoglobin is breaking down all the time, and they want to give you gene edits, right? Like with adenovirals, and the alternative would be just nanotech, because then you wouldn't have to lose your actual blood, and the titanium nano blood hemoglobin alternative would be able to emulate the same hemoglobin that you have, and it would also be able to duplicate the data strain, so you would be able to at least have your own data instead of having copied someone else's hemoglobin. So there's a couple of reasons why I think it makes more sense to me, but it's also probably going to be, the next major thing will be like nanotech to replace your blood, because it'll be safer.
I love how you're always so good at selling the nanotech New World Order.
But then I show you that it's the scary thing. I agree. See,
Yeah, I know it is scary, but I just want to point out that I'm 100% sure that everything they could reproduce, and it's good to see that what is technically possible. I'm sure if we would put ourselves into the proper EMFs and so on, and rehydrate and all of that, oxygenate, then we would be on 110% of what they can ever offer. But yeah,
so that's another thing I'm thinking about recently, because there's been a bunch of people who say things like, in the old days people didn't ever eat and they never had to poop. It's like, that doesn't sound very fun. I mean, I could get over poop, but even that you kind of want to do. But the eating and just in general, it sounds like you're dead.
Building is an environment, though, right?
And then people living forever, even the idea of people living forever, it tends to be that people live for a long time, 1,000 years, something like that. But to live forever, I mean, eventually you want to age and die and be replaced, and you want to be part of the human experience. Maybe you don't, I don't know, but it seems like
some people don't.
Yeah, are they people? But I think that's the problem. We're at a precipice where we're thinking, oh, we need to change so much because we have everything about living is wrong. Is it? Maybe we're supposed to live and die, and
sure. I just think the difference is that if we would live, let's start with 300 years, which many people, what I understand, would say it's perfectly possible if we stay hydrated and the frequencies are working and so on in the body. Then the thing they couldn't pull off is make a wholesale reset every 70 years in World War, because people would remember and be like, you're not getting through with the same BS again, because they only have a script of maximum 100 years, it appears. Yeah. Last pandemic was in 1920. I mean, for real. Yeah. So if people would live longer, they'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, my son, I remember it was only 90 years ago. They pulled exactly the same BS, so.
Very good point, Raphael. And sorry, guys. Thank you for being on your podcast.
You're all glitchy.
Letting me have extreme. I love you guys, but I'm using up all my bandwidth, so I'll rejoin in a little bit.
That's what's going on. All right, he's glitching. All right. We'll see when you can come back in. Just try not to glitch. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bernie. So I only got 3 more things. You can choose which one you want first. We have Star Trek, Cargo Cult, and Orphans.
Star Trek, Cargo Cult, and then in that order, in that order.
All right. Okay, in that order. So first link is here. This And I just, there's, I think, increasingly less good shows one can actually watch. You can sometimes give good recommendations, and I'll have to check out this
I still
hemoglobin.
haven't really been able to do Picard. Picard just feels like softcore porn
Yeah,
for like
no,
boomers
honestly, the first two
without the porn.
seasons were pretty painful. Yeah, honestly. Here it's getting somewhat better, and also it's kind of hilarious that basically he managed to assemble all the Next Generation cast. Yeah, and then even when they get their own spaceship, of course they don't take
Just
7
watch
of 9.
Emmanuel, the French erotic
Oh my
softcore
God.
series from 1974. If you had to have an
That's what they
alternative
show on open access television.
way better recommendation. Keep going.
Yeah. So anyhow, of course, even when they get the new ship, they kick out 7 of 9, even though she's one of the coolest actresses ever. But of course, they have to kick her out just so they can get on their old starship with the entire old crew, to make it nostalgic. It's kind of, these tricks they use. But the point I want to make is in this particular episode, so episode 9 of season 3, okay, spoiler alert, they basically have an issue with the changelings, people that can change their form. This in
Oh, the
itself is
changelings
interesting.
again.
Yeah. But also that now they cannot detect them with their old tools anymore because they're somewhat more advanced because of what they had done earlier or whatever. Yeah, this one is an interesting one. Yeah,
I love the changelings because like they look like the late 90s feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially gotta love those late 90s Deep Space Nine ooze animations when he's turning to liquid.
So good, yeah.
So good, yeah. But the point I want to make is here they eventually, again spoiler alert, discover that the changelings managed to infiltrate Starfleet. And now pay close attention, and anyone remembering what happened the last 3 years will catch what I'm saying right now. I'm just recounting the plot line. They managed to hack the transporter code. So anyone who would be transported through the teleportation
anybody would be
system,
rushing around, if you will. Keep going.
Yes. Would automatically, by that encoding they changed, receive a certain alteration in their DNA.
Oh.
And that's eventually also how they want to, now retake it or whatever. But basically, you want to get transported, you get your DNA changed. Everyone can figure it for themselves. And I'm not even saying this is exactly what's happening because it's still
that's cool.
not exactly clear.
I mean, it's horrible, but I'm glad they put that in
was
the
like,
show.
interesting that they put this in the show. Kind of blatantly. Nuts. And the only question, of course, would be who are the changelings that are causing all of this? What is that alluding to?
VBDC sent a 5. Thank you, Seth. We love you. Rossman say eat a little and live a long time and don't drink pipe water. Yeah, you should change your pipe water every day, probably several times a day if you're Euro about it. I know that's crazy, but do it. And then also Seth's videos are cool. Make sure you're watching VBDC. Shout out to Seth. Rad.
Yeah, and speaking of pipe water, just briefly, as we spoke about this, so from what I understand, usually water that's going through pipes is highly pressurized, so it's highly clusterized, which means it's not very bioavailable. So that's why you want to use water filtration systems. You want to spin your water. You want to basically recreate its natural state, just as if it were flowing down a river, oxygenated, spinning, and so on. And then it's definitely higher quality water.
Yeah, they make these cool little caps. I don't know where to recommend it right now, but you can get like this little, you can make it yourself too, which it goes between 2 bottles of water, like a sand dial or something. You know what I'm talking about? Like the sand dial. That's right. Yeah. So then the bottle will pour and it spirals right in the middle there. So all you need is this little centerpiece, and you can make that from 2 bottle caps and some tape and make the water spiral. So you can spiral your own water, which is pretty cheap to do. It's good for you to do. I recommend it. Picard, though, for me, it just also feels so pressured, that they just need to have, and also that girl's face. It just feels like, did she take HGH? I don't know, but I'll be okay.
Yeah, all right. So next up, orphans.
Yeah.
This is something a friend brought up to my attention. This is about the so-called Schwabenkinder or Swabian children. Maybe you have to run it through translator.
I'll do it, but I can already see where we're going with the Schwabenkinder. All right.
So this is like a site commemorating the idea that here it says over 300 years there was some kind of migration. Children between ages 6 and 14 came from the Alpine region, migrated to Upper Swabia to find work. there during the summer and support their families.
So they're not
Or again, like,
Swabians. They ended up in Swabia. Yeah. Brutal. And they were brought from
Yeah.
the Alpine region.
That's
So
what David always says, is that, you know, they want to get people out of the Alpine regions or desert regions or whatever, bring them into the city, indoctrinate them. Yeah. Bring them into the fold.
Come on, show me the. She wants me to go to the Alpines in Wyoming. That doesn't really seem like the same thing. I was trying to figure out, like, where's the Alps border? Not
Well, it goes
Switzerland, yeah.
through Austria. It goes, I think, up to Switzerland. It goes through Italy.
Where'd it go? I'm trying here. Österreich. Okay.
I think you have to say Alps, or just zoom in. There it is, right in the middle. Yeah.
No, see, look what happens when you do that. It's like, no, you're not allowed. Wow. Okay. Yeah, because it's large enough that it would go across. Okay. That's interesting because, yeah, I mean, as a mountain path goes too, because like having control of the Alps has always been.
Oh, I could tell you another interesting story just as we see this right now. So this comes without warranty. I'm sending you the image for a tunnel, and I'm telling you a story. So let's see.
This thing here with the plane, or no, this is different.
No, this will be the last topic.
Okay.
But in between, we have the Brenner Basistunnel. I sent the link just now. So this was one of, you know, always very contentious. Are we building a tunnel or not? And this was important to connect, apparently, Italy and Austria. And everyone, of course, knows about the Gotthard Tunnel and the Gotthard Tunnel. Very strange ceremony. But the story here is something different, which is that they started digging the tunnel, and supposedly they found a huge water reservoir. Like huge. Then they poured in, oh, interesting, yeah. They poured in 300 million tons or whatever of concrete. And now, lo and behold, there's all kind of, how would you say, ecological issues happening, and, you know, areas are drying out and all of that, because there was basically the huge in-mountain sea, and instead of using it or something, they just said, oh, we want to build a tunnel, so we're just gonna pull through and fill it up with concrete. And yeah, now you have ecological devastation because of it. But I think up to this point, it has not been officially acknowledged, of course, because it's an important economic project and so on. And I think it's not publicly known that there apparently was a huge sea there. So yeah, things your government does behind your back.
So Fiat Chrysler, I've been thinking about that a bit recently. A subsidiary of Stellantis. Just kidding, Stellantis. Stellantis. What is Stellantis at this point? Because they're the mob, but they're the government. They own
interesting logo for sure. It had to be the A.
Dude, it's more than an A. This is like Halo. You know what I mean? It's like that looks like the genitals of an alien, you know, or a snake. Maybe it's like a snake's mouth opening, but still, it looks like it's spraying venom or something. Terrifying. And they own big chunks of everything because they're an investment group. That's the legal jumbo, they call it, right? They invest. So they're kind of, I mean, I don't want to compare them to BlackRock or Vanguard because they're more specifically proud of the fact that they are involved in cars, but they have lots of money in other things, right? Like Foxconn. They have money in all sorts of places. And in Mexico, they have a, you know, major factory, which is mostly robotic. Yeah, I mean, pretty interesting group of financiers who also are involved in, they were involved in Russia, which I don't know how that's going anymore, but they had some involvement with the Lada. Although I think Putin has pushed the Lada into being like a fully government controlled vehicle. But so having these tunnels between Italy and Austria, I mean, it's also kind of important to remember that part of Italy is in Italy. Maps, right? Italy stole Austria, Germany. So after the war, World War II, they had a bunch of land, and then
Right.
the Italians were like, okay, we need our land back, and they're like, okay, well, give us the maps. So the Italians drew these maps and said, these are the maps we used to have. Like, these aren't the real maps, but how do you prove it? So now there's big chunks of Italy where they speak German. They speak
Yeah,
like a
I want to
weird.
say, so this is actually, I mean, as an Austrian, this is perfectly well known. And even, I'm not sure if they still do it today, but on many news shows, or at least back in the day when they were showing the weather maps, they were showing it for Austria. And then also always for, it's called Southern Tyrol. Yeah, I
Right.
believe. Or no, I'm sorry,
That's
I believe
it.
that's actually, but
South
isn't that, no, oh yeah, it's autonomous. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
both. Yeah, right, it's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
This
and
guy
here,
right
yeah,
here.
people speak German, and yeah, so that's maybe the part they just took. But then you're always also wondering, like, how can this be possible? What kind of a confusion or mayhem or reset must there have been that people are like, yeah, sure, I don't know where the border is. Like, if the locals didn't know, or what?
Well,
What's going on?
the locals they couldn't do anything about it. And also they'd lived there for so long and they weren't necessarily trying to be part of the Reich, you know what I mean? Because they've been out, they don't really care. And like they're just farmers in the mountains. And all of these regions of North Italy used to be Slavic lands, like you have Slovenia, and you've got these you know, from the Carthaginian expanse. Originally, they made a law, the Romans said no more elephants. And afterwards, that's how they defeated Carthage, because like these elephants are weapons of mass destruction. Later on, taking elephants to Greece and then to North Italy, they crossed over, and then crossing the Rubicon using elephants, right? So the way that they took this land was to decimate the population, force everyone into conscription, mix up the locals, bring in more Roman population or Italian population or whomever were in charge of the area at the time, because a lot of the people there still are barbarian conscripted from Germany that were brought and were in charge. So it does get really fuzzy, because the only thing decided is that they live here and it's there. Like, it's kind of like saying, who do the Basque belong to? You know what I mean? The difference is the Basque were able to keep their own language, but even still, South Tyrol's German isn't the same as normal German. Like, it's different.
Honestly, this is something I wonder about, because of course, I mean, Germany is very big, so it makes sense. You have a northern dialect, southern, and so on. But even in Austria, almost, or every county basically has their own dialect. And here I'm also wondering how, if it was a reset language, how could they make it so specific, or why would they introduce all these dialects? It's because if you go from like the easternmost part, let's say Vienna, to the westernmost part, which is Vorarlberg, close to Switzerland, I mean, I like the way they speak and you can understand them. But you could also be like, it's really different. And this is even supposedly the same state. And even in school, supposedly we learn the same standardized version of the language. But still, you get such heavy local dialects for, let's say, maybe only 500,000 people each, because the counties aren't much larger than that. Yeah, maybe a million. So
it sucks
like,
when I
what is
try to
this?
like talk to anybody in Austria, because I have no idea what they're saying. And like, as soon as you get like 20, 30 miles away from Wien or Salzburg, you're like, holy guacamole, this
Exactly.
is next level stuff going
Yeah.
on here. But they can speak English. So not everybody, but a lot of people can.
Yeah. And there was something you mentioned in the documentary, I forgot the exact point, about some genetic group in northern Italy that was like a higher, maybe red hairs or something, some kind of a, I forgot the exact gene.
Ladino people, maybe
some particular gene code where you showed a map with like concentrations of it, and it was clear that there's more of it. But the Ladino, yeah, because even here it's
Ladines
like,
are an ethnic group of northern Italy, include the South Tyrol, Badia, and Gardania of Fossa and Trentino. So up in the north there, you know, and then they're in the center of South Tyrol, right by a place called Fascia.
go figure.
But that's because they were collected. See, this is the same kind of fascia as the Confederacy of Switzerland, right? So they have the same kind of vibe. They're like, yeah, but we're a smaller collective. And so we get together when we need to if there's an invasion, which, see how that worked out, you know. But they are their own people, right? Swiss Romansh also. That's the other thing. There's gypsies, right?
I mean, Rome, I honestly don't know if that language is related to Romanes, what most of them speak today. But Yeah, I mean,
Romansh, Gallo-Romance language in Swiss canton of Grisian. Romansh has been recognized as a national language of Switzerland since 1938. Interesting. So not a gypsy thing, actually, like some sort of pseudo-Romance language descending from Vulgar Latin.
whatever that means, right? So,
Well, yeah, exactly. Because that's the other funny thing is that they say that they have people that speak Latin in Switzerland, right?
really,
Yeah, like they have like 11,000 people. Not cis Latin. That could have been dangerous. Let's see here. I guess there, yeah, Romansh is the Latin. Latin is occasionally used
yeah.
in some forms of context to denote the country. I mean, maybe it's not as
I think we
common.
looked at the constitutions of Switzerland, which also pointed to the idea that they also could have just been reset in 1848 or whatever it was. So
Neo-Latin. Wow, that's kind of interesting to acknowledge it like that. But yeah, I guess the Romansh is essentially like a kind of a Latin language. So, and how many people they say speak it? 40,000, 60,000 to 40,000 people that can speak the language. So Switzerland's weird. It's got a lot of weird languages.
definitely.
People, it's not just speaking Italian or French or German. I mean, you got to wonder also about this community.
Because I mean, it's obviously manufactured.
Yeah.
Well, but how would it naturally form? Like you have 4 different languages. Like how realistic is that? That this is not a contrived, partitioned together state construction. And then you send out just so you have the Swiss Guard for the Vatican, right? We talked about this. So.
Yeah, that's the thing. The Swiss Guard. What do you think about the Swiss colors, right? Like, I mean, the Swiss Guard colors are so trippy. They're epic.
Yeah, this color combination I honestly haven't figured out yet. Because the only the red, white, and black you would have like in Africa a lot, I think. But this type of, yeah.
In Tekkaman, the Space Knight, he has the same color schema. And this is like the somewhat forgotten what's the other group? So there's the Council on Foreign Relations, and then they started the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission group was started because Rockefeller couldn't get a deal with the Bilderberg group to allow in Japan or certain members. So the Trilateral Commission was created. One of the cartoons that they created was Tekkaman Uchi no Kishi, which is all about the world is ending because of pollution. And then aliens start attacking. And like, why would they attack a dying world? Because there's a way to save the earth through recycling or something like that. They all work together.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Something crazy.
They all work together. Yeah, that's for sure.
And it's all about this
big club.
Yeah,
you ain't in it.
So much. But yeah, he's got to like guard the planet with his Swiss Guard, outfit in space. He's a
Swiss knife.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The Swiss knife in space.
And he has a Triskelion on his forehead. Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty, he has a Triskelion, which he can throw, I'm pretty sure also. But I mean, pretty great. Pretty much the best cartoon that the Trilateral Commission made that I can think of. And it uses the same color schema. Do they say anywhere like red, yellow, blue, Swiss color significance? Let's find out if there's somewhere I can find it.
How to use the power of color. That's how useful search engines have become.
Oh God, yeah.
Swiss.
We can do this a better
Where's
way.
the AI?
Yeah, it's true. Edge. We'll open up Edge. We'll ask Edge what it says. And we're still going to get to the what's it called?
The cargo cult.
The cargo cult. Okay. Bing. Good to see you. Long time no see. What is the significance of the color scheme for the Swiss Guard? Red, yellow, and blue. Come on, Bing. Shake it up. See what we get. This is kind of like using a Ouija board. The uniform of the Swiss Guard, the Vatican's official army, is among the recognized blah, 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 eye-catching, colorful, according to the website. Famous colors of blue, yellow.
Ooh,
Medici family.
Ooh.
Red is
what a
for the
joke.
Medici family. And the blue and yellow is for the Della Rovere family of Julius II. The Pope first organized the Swiss Guard. No, that's a joke, but it's also serious. Think about it. They're like, so who's the guard? Specific families. specific families get to be the guards. It's like a caste system, right? And you're descendant of the original guards of the bank, the Vatican
Oh yeah,
Bank.
but it's the Medici Code. I mean, even in official history, they are like it's like the Federal Reserve prototype, no?
They're the gangsters, man. Netflix had that show, right? Like the Medici, you know. They're Dustin Hoffman. They were just mobsters that were trying to figure out how to get their kids to be priests and in power, you know, because they needed to stay in power. Like they arrived in power in a really powerful point in history, and they were in the right city to end up. You know, everyone was trying to take over the church the same way people were trying to take over the government. But I mean, to swear your allegiance to the Pope that you'll kill and die as an agent, like an assassin or something like that. And who was the other family they brought up? The Julius II?
Della Rovere family. I never heard of those.
Della Rovere. Of the oak tree, a noble family in Italy. Humble origins in Savona, in Liguria. Oh, yeah, and in northwest Italy along the coast. They built the Sistine Chapel, which is named for him.
Of course they did.
Wow.
And even here, what do you think about David Ewing Jr.'s idea that many of the Gothic churches, they actually just built, let's say, on top of a mosque-type looking building or water station-looking building?
I think it's a bit of both. So, like, obviously, look at the stucco here. There's a lot of things where you go to churches, they've shot the faces off of, you know, because it goes back and forth. Alhambra maybe would be a good example. How they were stuck in edge. So, you know, this was a Muslim church, and it was a castle, and it was sieged, and at some point it was conquered, and then they started removing Muslim art, but a lot of it didn't matter because it was just like geometric, and so then they put up their own statues, and then they ended up getting the statues shot off again. The same thing in, let's see, Spanish Mosque Cathedral. Let's see if I can find an example. Like this one's an example. This one went back and forth, and what's it? Granada? No, it's the place Cordoba. In Cordoba, they have this one. It was obviously this is covered in beautiful things, but it's so much more like an airport than it is a mosque or a church. And I don't know if you saw Ewing's newest video we did, because it was kind of weird, but we talked a bit about how holy water is being funneled out of these places that are essentially like the sewers, or some of this stuff's amazingly beautiful, don't get me wrong, but also you have to imagine what is the practical purpose for some of these buildings. And it might not have been just for sewers, but it could have been for something more to do with hydroelectric and water and power and filtration. Sewers would have been part of that,
And also the whole, I mean, it could have been integrated, but even the sewer aspect could have also already been the downgrade version of it, maybe,
Well, let's also look at like the water and power San Francisco.
Because from what I understand, supposedly you aren't actually really supposed to put anything.
Look at this. What is this? Sorry if you can already tell. This is the San Francisco Water and Power Park, right? Does this look like a mosque or a church to you? Enough so that I would say it looks more like one of them than does it look more like that than it does a power station? You know what I mean? So what we think of as a power station is kind of confused, because a lot of the Wilshire Boulevard Temple kind of, you've got these buildings that are built right on top of these amazing technological pursuits of power for the entire rest of the city is coming through this place. Then yeah, they're going to end up making a nice building above it, right? So we kind of started hiding that stuff more and more, but it makes a lot of sense to have this beautiful decorative building on top of the system that's underneath it, right? Because you're so proud of what it's doing. It's cleaning the water. Maybe the bile is even being used for compost or for fertilizer or something like that. But yeah, see, here's an interesting picture. You have nuns in here, because these nuns are coming to this mosque. And then I remember I went in there and I tried to sit where the Muslims pray, and they got upset because right now Muslims aren't allowed to pray in there. Not Muslim style, but you can go sit in the pew and pray Catholic style or get a selfie, which they prefer, And I think that's the other thing. It's so easy for them to put on weird music in these churches and turn them into museums now, where you walk around and get selfies. They're not really churches anymore. And I think that also must lend from the fact that they never were that divine. They were more technologically important. You know, but they're important in such a way that they're also where people, you know, put their most beautiful relics at some point later. God, it's amazing though, right? Pretty sweet.
Oh yeah.
So this is an example. Like we take something that was Muslim and then cover it with Catholic art, and so now it's got all these drawings of people on it, and so that's totally cool. No longer Muslim.
Yeah, I think that's what David also showed with the Orthodox Church, right? That there was a redecoration action basically going on.
Yeah. But I'm just not necessarily sure it was like it started out Muslim or Christian or as a religious thing. Is this the cult? Oh, Robert Zephyr. Yeah. Hold on. We'll get. Wait, is there commercial? Oh, because I'm in Edge. Let me go back to my.
One sec. Down.
Which city are we looking at?
That looks like Ontario, Winnipeg,
Calgary, Alberta.
Calgary. Sorry.
The Bow Tower supposed to be way bigger, but they downsized.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy towers in the middle of Canada also make me think because they have so much energy that they are producing in the middle of Canada. It just sounded like who's living there.
Right? Ooh, our protesting national workers all on strike because our government won't pay a fair wage.
They should put more colors on the money. That's all they need to do. Make the money slightly more like neon this season.
That's a good idea, eh? Rainbow money, it would fly with the liberals.
Dude, it's got to be lunacy. Oh, man, that tower's nice. So this is the cargo cult phenomenon video right here on the right.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point it out because I heard about the term, but I never knew what's going on there. And
Zephyr's
I was sure like
got this video, but this is not his originally. This is an old video. I think, isn't this from the show with Leonard Nimoy? Spock does like a narration of mysteries and stuff and talks about how this happened. There's another one also with Kirk where he talks about this. This is brought up a few times. Just the idea that they saw planes come and then they built effigies to the towers, to the landing sites, to the satellites, to anything that they had left there, you know.
Yeah, I just seen that Robert Seffert video. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's a way old story. But there's the thing. I didn't watch the video, so I don't know if he brings it up. But this was hyper intentional. The first time it happened, supposedly Americans didn't expect it and they were surprised. But by the 60s, they knew this was the way to do it. So, you know, by 58, 60, you land a place and you're informed what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to play a walkie-talkie. Like, so you come down in a helicopter onto an island and you get out of the helicopter. You might come out with a parachute or something like that. You just come out like out of the sky. And then people are showing up there and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. And then you record that and play it back in their faces so they hear their own words in their own language with their own voice back to them. And they're like, whoa. And, you know, you're bulletproof. Maybe you have to kill somebody, but you probably don't, you know, even have to kill anybody. And, you know, you become a god because you give people soda pop and things like that. You show them that you are so much more, you're superhuman. And that became a major part of the U.S. military to show that we were superhuman, that being an American was, I mean, I was just looking up ice cream the other day. Did you see the ice cream thing? What's it called again? Twitter/Exertus. The Gads got Andreas Exertus. Whole different me. The Gedunk bar. So every Navy boat had to have ice cream, had to have thousands of pounds of ice cream, had to have a machine for making ice cream, had to have a way of getting the ice cream, had to have a cook who knew how to make the ice cream. They would get bananas often. That's a major naval flavor, right? Of course. And the reason was because they said, can you imagine a greater tonic to the body and to spirit than real ice cream served in the steaming jungles or in the hard-won beachheads? They found that morale was so improved by the idea of giving them soda pop and ice cream that the naval officers, you know, they would do anything and they would go anywhere, and they understood the importance of what they were doing on another level. because it was like being a conquistador versus the natives. It dehumanized the natives because they didn't have these experiences, and it constantly brought them back to their centered place, their ice cream, right? I mean, it was crazy essential. And there's all these documents back and forth in the Navy saying how important it is to morale, and all these graphs from managerial theory showing how that was going to be the thing that they needed that was going to win the war, whatever war it was. And they even had ice cream trucks that they built when they went to Normandy, which is kind of blows my mind. Like they didn't tell me about ice cream at Normandy. I did not know there was ice cream on D-Day. I don't know. That just seems crazy.
Right? I never heard about that. And why don't we have banana ice cream today?
Dude, because bananas went extinct, you know? That's why. Yeah, so I don't know, but Bernie, I'm sorry, Raph, you were talking about the idea of this, that we're trained maybe to see these things coming from the sky, the cargo cult phenomena.
Well, here, so just take it another meta layer. So here, even in the official documentary, they mentioned that, oh, and then James or whatever came and he said this, and oh yeah, and also James predicted that the white men will come back and build roads, and now we have proof this is correct. Basically, just to show how through slightly superior technology or just sleight of hand, you can indoctrinate a whole island. And
Right.
then, always take it meta perspective. Let's apply this to ourselves. What about, for example, the Roswell crashes? What about whatever other phenomena they put in front of us? And they can do exactly the same thing to the entire population or to everyone plugged into the matrix system, only because they don't understand that particular angle. And then you get the weirdest type of behavior out of the populace, just like shown in this example. And, just again, pointing out the meta that we may be in a similar position. So...
Man behind the curtain.
And then just because someone posted this, I tried to look it up. So I'm just sending you the link right now. I'm not sure if this is a translation error, but supposedly British media or different media reports that in Ukraine, 7 quote unquote giant British soldiers were killed. So, I'm not exactly sure what that means, if it just means soldiers of great strength, or if they're really talking about giants. I guess there's no proper pictures.
Or a giant number of them, possibly, but
7
there
giants.
were pictures of these giant soldiers from back in the day, right? Like, there's pictures of these 8-9 feet giant soldiers, like all around the world, like right before World War II and like in World War I and before that. It's pretty nuts.
We talked about the Potsdam Giants, right? Already.
Right.
And so just like as a recap, they were it was Wilhelm the First, all over Europe, and with the help of the Ottoman Empire, kidnapped as many tall people, like women and men, and so turned the men into soldiers and forced them to breed with tall women in order to produce tall children, and this for generations. And eventually Napoleon decided he wanted to kill off all the Potsdam Giants about a century later, or maybe 2 centuries later. But then, so there are descendants who escaped, but so many of them were killed, and we don't really recount that part of our history. But it's interesting because we talk about how Napoleon was short, and it isn't that he's short today. So it's more interesting than ever to presuppose there were that many Potsdam Giants or that many tall people that were considered a threat for whatever reason, right? As well as considered a benefit to Wilhelm, who was trying to, reproduce them.
Yeah, every time I gotta mention Attack on Titan, I'm sorry if it's boring someone, but this is really something to watch, both for the reset story and the giant and the buildings out of giants, Stellium 7 type ideas.
Totally.
And mental illness as usual.
I mean, also I think of the, like George Bush and some of these super tall families that are in control today, and wonder, are they the descendants of Potsdam? Evil Fandango asks how tall. Some like 7'4", as tall as possible, the tallest they could get, tall enough that they would die young, taller than is normal today. At least over 6'6", I think, is the minimum. Like, it was very important. They had to be at least 2 meters. The original height required was at least 6'2", and then, the king was only 5'3". So for him, it was an important thing that he had like a personal issue there. And he liked to keep them around. Like he liked to just watch the Potsdam Giants, like to just have them dressed up when he was depressed and have them brought in so he could see he had a bunch of tall giants, you know. But as time went
when
on,
were they dissolved? In 17 something already, right?
Well, when the king died in
1806 at the
1740,
end it says.
there's 3,200, but it's 1806 they're supposedly disbanded, but they still existed, right? Because there's still these tall mercenary guys. There's like, for instance, James Kirkland, the Irish giant. He was 7'2". You know, there were giants, and there were people that were tall they were soldiers, and so the Irish ended up working for the Spanish because the Irish were controlled by the Spanish before that point. So they had mercenaries going to South America, and so there's a lot of tall. If you go to South America, you'll find Potsdam giant descendants that are in charge of parts of Argentina or Chile, and it's not like these people are all dead, you know. But there were a number of them that were killed off 100 years after they were disbanded, because so many of the descendants of the Potsdam giants were still, you know, military families, and then their kids would be, you know, hunted down essentially, which is kind of crazy. There was a group, an effort to try to kill these tall people. The Battle of Jena Auerstedt was fought October 6th on the Saale River. I think, yeah, this was like a pretty bad one. 48,000 strong, 96,000 men, 40,000 sent to the battle, 10,000 killed or wounded, 15,000 captured. Just gets worse from there, you know. And like they didn't want tall people to exist. The other thing was that they would be stretched on racks, you know, to make them taller. So some of these guys were tortured on both sides, and so there was no reason for them to really be loyal to anybody. So as many of them as did escape, which is why there still are descendants of Potsdam giants.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, there's only one last thing I had, which I recently checked out. It's more like, you know, one of these contentious topics, but let me just ask you in a simple way. What have you heard, or what do you think about Aretha Franklin?
What do I think of Aretha Franklin? I respect her. Is that right? The right response to that.
Maybe. So anyhow, I'm just watching one of those channels. I'm not even sure, because this guy literally got banned off of YouTube, I don't know, 100,000 times. He's on BitChute. I'll just send you the main channel. You don't have to, you know, go into the
ECT. Yeah, that works. I was making sure. I was worried. I was like, is that the wrong person? No, it worked out.
Yeah, that's correct.
She makes me feel like a natural woman. No?
Exactly. That's the point. And now, so either you can, so the channel, I just may name it.
Oh, that's what the point is? Don't do this to me. Oh, I wasn't ready for the transvestigation of Aretha Franklin.
This is always coming up. And even to me, I'm always like, is this serious? But ever since I saw this First Lady Boys compilation on Odyssey and looking at those old and new pictures, I was like, well, and then, you know, Barack Obama and so on. And then here, the example here is just a funeral, which on a channel called Mac Bitter Truth. This is to anyone who wants to relax a bit and have fun about it, even though he's many hardcore things. He has like this Jamaican type voice. He's talking in a really funny way, I think, or entertaining, but also first you think like, is he talking in a strange way? He doesn't maybe appear so intellectual, and sometimes it may be using somewhat bad language. But if you try to get into what he's saying and understand, you can see that it really appears he has more points than even I would like to admit.
Is that a flying vagina cloud?
Oh, it's very possible. Ever since that candle, you know, all bets are off.
Yeah.
So he's oftentimes looking at different people and different stars, and then yeah, you just gotta wonder basically on this funeral video. So it's Aretha Franklin. One sec, I'm sending you the link. You can, you know, think what you will, but in the end, you see all these famous people, of course, lined up there, everyone tributing them, and you see her. If you just skip forward somewhere, then singing "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman," and you see Barack Obama next to Michelle Obama.
Oh no.
And they go completely crazy when she sings that. And then, I mean, you gotta piece 2 and 2 together. I'm sorry.
Could it just be that it meant a lot to Obama, but not necessarily the same thing to Aretha Franklin? But yeah, no, man, that's a weird song now. The way you say it, I don't know what to say about that. Oh
and
yeah.
Bill Clinton, of course, it's like
Well, you know, the thing about me is I used to be a woman. God.
It's like everyone's coming out
Ellen
to
Bill.
party.
God,
So
it's
it's obvious that she's an important, cultural icon. And then, just got to think about everything they can officially do today with, hormone changes and all of that. And, just do that 50 years earlier and you get all these, yeah.
I mean,
And
this
then I
picture
wouldn't,
always to me was like, I mean, so on one hand, like, who said this recently that Irish have two modes, like babyface and banshee or something? But on the other hand, growing up in Santa Cruz, knowing a lot of people that have transitioned, it's one of those things where it's like, on one hand, because you can't always tell, it's important to recognize that it's possible. But on the other hand, it's also kind of like, I mean, that would just add an interesting layer. At very least, make that movie where all the politicians are actors and they have to act like that hard. But the difference is also very strong because you look at somebody like, like so Michael Jackson or something like the
Bill Gates.
Castrato. Okay, but I was just gonna talk about Castrato because like a lot of the
Oh yeah,
artists.
I think he actually mentions this in that video. I believe
They
he
took
mentioned exactly
boys
this
and then they
point.
made sure
Exactly,
that they kept
exactly this.
their,
Yes.
yeah, they castrated them. And this is, I think you can actually still, there's like a recording of like castratos from Italy from the 19th century that made it into the early
I'm
20th century.
sorry, that was the other one because I was looking through his videos and the Castrato story actually relates to Nothing Compares to You. Who is it? I think Nothing Compares to You.
Sinead O'Connor.
No, Whitney Houston.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And even for me, this is like something because I'm not against anyone doing that if they want, but it's like tricking entire generations to make that to be the top. Oh no, sorry, not her, not her.
Written
Sorry.
by Prince.
I confused this. Sorry, I meant Whitney Houston. Sorry.
Recorded by
Who knows
Sinead
about
O'Connor.
her? Who knows about her? But I mean Whitney Houston.
Yeah, just really quickly since you went there, now I have to do the picture of the Pope. You know what I mean? Remember when she was on Saturday Night Live and she was like, "This is the real enemy," and she ripped up a picture of Pope John Paul II.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then like 2 weeks later, Madonna was on and she ripped up a picture of like Maury Amsterdam or some producer. I forget, but they tried to like de-escalate the thing. Like Madonna kind of made a joke to protect the Pope, which I thought was weird of all people. Yeah. Okay. So but Whitney Houston, you could have just said who does crack better than anybody or something, like make it easier.
Yeah. So which is her song again? The most famous one.
I Want to Dance with Somebody comes to mind. I don't know.
Yeah, no, but basically what they pointed out in one of those videos, I'm not even sure. I think it wasn't on this channel, but also somewhere on Rumble where you have more of those type of videos. But just pointing out that the ability to hold certain tonality, seems so extremely amazing because we're not used to.
All the Man That I Need. Is that the one you're thinking of? All the Man That I Need?
No, something with oh, I'll always love you. I will always love you.
I will always love you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I never took Whitney Houston for like a dude. I just figured that she did a lot of crack. But I mean, I don't know if you've seen what crack does to your face. Also.
I know. But here the idea would be that, of course, as you get older, and you can somehow, I mean, there are all kinds of different ways how also a man can look really strange and so on. But it could then show some actual original biological gender more the more you age. And then, of course, it's just about having a certain type of perspective and knowing of certain techniques, how to put a corset, look at the, body hip ratio and so on. And again, I wouldn't even harp on this if this wasn't just a huge part of deception, basically, because if those people would declare themselves as such, I'd be like, okay, that's what it is. But don't make all the girls or whatever cry because they can never look like you because you're just not the gender you're proclaiming yourself to be.
Oh my God. I'm in Santa Cruz, California. I could probably find a transgender history course with multicultural emphasis at a community college and learn about the history, what they think about the Sumerian Akkadian text and everything. But it does seem interesting that in the 20th century to the 21st century, we went from, what is it? Don't ask, don't tell, essentially about everything, to now you have to just socially accept that everything is this way, and so you could have dealt with the fact that there probably were some transvestites or something 100 years ago, and that was pretty common. It existed. But now we're at the point where we're saying, okay, there are people that are the other gender all their lives. So I wonder if you're going to start hearing more. I mean, transgendered celebrity, like you're gonna start seeing this as just this out
Oh, I
thing.
mean, they
you know?
started with the one I think was a decent actor. What's their name? I would have to say now. This actor that played in Billions, if you know, where of course portrayed super positively this non-binary, I think, biological female, also in the series. But she's like this super computer whiz. But she's more like a genderless robot, actually, which is kind of, this other part of the story. But that's, I think, where they really started to introduce that to make it normal to have non-binary individuals as openly as stars. And I just think, again, it's a big deception if they've already been doing that for many years, not telling everyone and confusing the whole population with those beauty ideals and other things. Yeah. Just
it might help naturalize it in people. Because, I remember a few years ago, someone pointed out, they were like, Fine Young Cannibals is the greatest Afro-punk band of the 80s. I was like, wait, what? Because I think of Fine Young Cannibals as an 80s band, and I remember in the 80s, race wasn't that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Not the way it is today. It's hard to explain. I mean, so to find out later, you're like, oh, this guy, I guess technically that would mean that all of his music, because he's partially African American, that means, everything about the music is now Afropunk. No, I mean, it's just, we are reapplying labels later, that's the thing. So these celebrities, we're going to look back and say, oh, well, they were transgendered stars. We'll be able to say, hey, look at, all of these characters. God, I don't know. But I also think it's kind of weird that transgenderism isn't about being yourself. It's about getting injection surgeries, social, corporate.
It's about getting particularly funded, even paid by the state, which means paid by everybody else, things. Then, of course, and I'm going to tread lightly here, but introduce it much too early before it should even be a topic, and encourage people to make life-altering changes that cannot easily be reversed, and which is public by now. You simply have too many people regretting it. And what is also public by now is you have too many studies showing that these people, they need love and attention and to be able to properly unfold themselves, and they don't need a surgery,
Yeah.
And out of those, if you would because there also, I know people, even one quite popular individual in Austria, and I would now say she is transitioned, but she also managed to legally put it through, because there was a ruling in Germany and she made it apply to Austria, that you could redefine yourself, but you would not need to make an operation,
Absolutely.
Where I'm like, okay, and with some people I want to say buy it, or I'll however role play with them. It doesn't matter how you want to look at it. I can accept that totally if the people are integrated and they're not looking to force it on anybody. And actually, she's one of those, and she's like saying it's completely the wrong way to go about it. So. And
so also weirdly, you think about the Noahide and the world order and the Talmudic law and everything, right? And it says in Deuteronomy 23, I mean, not that I'm like saying, oh, when you should listen to it, but it's just really weird that the Bible would have gone as far as to have this verse. 23, no one who has been emasculated by crushing or cutting his testicles may enter the assembly of the Lord. That's the New International Version. Let's find you like King James and stuff. We'll go further. But let's see. Where's just go to back here. King James Version. Or hath his privy member cut off. See, he goes even further. Yeah. Shall not enter the congregation of the Lord. So wounded in the stones, like they've tried to like kind of make it hidden, but if you get the Amplified Bible or any of the the original versions that show you, do you have Amp here somewhere? There you go. He who has been castrated by having his testicles crushed or his male organ cut off shall not enter the congregation of the Lord. So pretty weird, because why? What are they? Who cares? But apparently it's made its way into this book. When would that have been a thing? Were there a bunch of people that were like, I think I'm a woman? I think it's probably more to do with slavery and people that were became eunuchs or were forcibly castrated. That they're forbidden for some reason, which is why. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, I also wonder why would they put it in a book like this? It almost seems like, oh, don't look into the occult, because then you'll learn all their secrets. and you're like, oh, you are not allowed to do this, so we can maybe use this group in secret. I don't know, yeah, or we can use it outside the public consciousness and in a deceptive way. Maybe I don't know, because also for me, I'm like, why would you want to put any type of star? Maybe I don't know if there's any which are official yet, where in retrospect you would say, oh, this superstar was actually a man or a woman. Like, why wouldn't you do that publicly? Like, why was this why was this introduced? Just like you said, what's the point of the prohibition against that in this way? So I don't know.
It does seem like the more we're pushed towards these ideas to make yourself more yourself, it's just becoming less and less yourself. That's the ideal, is it's trying to trick you into thinking you aren't yourself. You're all the things that you can become if you get rid of yourself. And that's everybody. Everyone wants to do that. I mean, the Bible is, especially in Deuteronomy, it's trying to tell you this is when people are under major control. They've left Egypt. They're living wild in the desert, etc. It's pretty cutthroat and crazy. But also it's right after Egypt. So you've got a bunch of people that were probably priests, and the idea that maybe Moses didn't have his tongue cut out, but his testicles or something to that effect. I mean, a Sarsif, and some of the stories of the other priests, like that, it would be a eunuch class of priests. So maybe it was some way of stopping the eunuch class of priests from having any power over this transitionary period of the Exodus, leaving Egypt and controlling the new government.
I don't know how this relates, but of course makes me think of Varys from Game of Thrones, who's the most famous eunuch, but super powerful as spy master, just assuming that there is always some correlation between fiction and whatever hidden history.
Yeah, historically eunuchs seem pretty interesting. Don't get me wrong. Like, they're singers, they're dancers, they're running our society in a lot of interesting ways. But they can't reproduce. They have no say over the future. The priest class kind of tried to take over the idea of the eunuch by turning men into celibate monks, right? Which wasn't originally
there must
part
be
of the
some
church.
connection here to that part as well. Yeah.
Totally. You force it, you conquer some people, you take their best kids, they're allowed to help you transition the government and live well, but they're not allowed to breed. You can't be in charge of the next generation.
And I'm just thinking, what could make this particular class especially dangerous, or what would be the advantage? Oh, look at the nice patterns in the background, but Game of Thrones is full of it. Something, what could be the advantage of it, or why could they become potentially dangerous?
Well, if you're a eunuch and you can't breed, then you might place some
them
kid
to steal their children or something.
Yeah, you put someone with your birthday in charge when you die, and that's like the foundling kind of thing. I think you had a foundling thing the orphans thing you were going to show also.
That was the one about the Swabian children. Yeah.
Oh, that is okay. So I think the idea of you can take orphans and you can raise them to be, majorly integral to the running of the society, but they don't have any control over
an expendable manager class.
Yeah.
And they will not want to take hold in the system because they can't.
Right.
Not multi-generationally. Yeah.
But they can have, and they will want to have, the things that are made available by the state, like these, like the goods. They wear nice clothes, and things like that. So it also kind of perpetuates the value, the sexless values of the state, right? Which are trying to get people to work to buy. But they can't focus on anything else than what they're told to focus on. I don't know. That seems also kind of perseverant, like we have today, and this is something that's valuable to the elite class. Are so many kids aren't breeding for whatever reasons. They've got them to focus on their art or whatever, and so it's kind of a eunuch class in and of itself, chemically castrated or something and hormonally unbalanced, and this is kind of not gone away.
You mean we're headed towards like general sterilization? Yeah, I mean, in terms of the statistics, yes.
God.
Oh, and also, of course, this would be another point, because I was thinking, like, what is the thing with the, if you're castrated, you can't enter the lordship or whatever. Whether this was however this was meant, or what the controller faction intended, the only one thing I could think of is certainly it would change your internal energy dynamics in your body, because you don't have this production, and maybe also you wouldn't have certain proclivities in terms of, let's call it anger or force or whatever, which may also be something, of course, you rather want to weed out, because if you have no masculine energy within the populace, like we discussed also last time with the wars and the culling, then you can reduce that amount of energy from the whole system, and it's easier to manage, because there will only be one big daddy, and then according to David, it's the Papa, the Pope, you know, and everyone else. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, that is, again, like liberation theology. I think we're really close to that point. People are going to be living more and more in a communal environment where they're working for the state. If you can have room and board at your corporation, right, it becomes a monastery. And
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much the only way people are going to be able to live pretty soon, right? They're going to have to live together for an agenda, you know?
Yeah, but ideally for our own agenda, you know, to uplift the spirits and liberate humanity. But yeah,
Yeah,
if we
I think
don't
we
act,
could.
then that would be then we have a Shadowrun type, you know, corporate army system with cyberware.
Yeah, some of the utopias. I think you guys should also make sure that you visit the teamrabbithole.com. There's been some new episodes. April 13th was the last one with Zoe.
Yeah, we have an astrologer. Before that, we had a pretty interesting discussion with Jordan. This was about, you know, whether you are God or not and what that means exactly, and the you know, ego traps. And of course, before that, we had David Charles Plate, who's a regular on Think Tank. It was a pretty cool interview where he was talking about, you know, his story and so on. You know, Jim always knows how to ask the right questions. So, you know, we get to all the deeds. And yeah. And of course, also actually, because I really loved your interview with David, but I was already informed because I think in one of the recent shows, he had mentioned this to me, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is going to be the toilet gate. So everyone who hasn't seen that on the Exodus channel, or even go on playlists here, just to remind everybody again, on the top you have playlists, and there you have David Ewing Jr. Reset Research, Mark Martin stuff, and we have David. So everyone who wants to binge on that, highly recommended.
Super epic. Yeah, there's 28 Ewing talks now. That's
yeah,
amazing.
Across different channels. There's also this Endgame Islam channel. They also recently made a great video with him, which are Muslims talking to him, which is great, of course, and publicizing it. So yeah, that's
I'll check this out.
pretty cool.
That's legit.
Yeah. And of course, here, just very briefly showing how all the Qurans in this example here were destroyed 1924. And we have a similar story with the Sikhs. This was the last thing I wanted to bring up. What's his name? I have to find him now. MacArthur. Well, anyhow, there is a guy. There's like two guys who basically did exactly the same thing to the Sikh documents. So again, you have around 1850. You have two guys showing up. I believe MacArthur or something was his name. I had it on the comment. And they basically translate all the Sikh texts for you. You know, again, the same story as always. So, but it's not. I'm sorry, I don't have the link right now. I had it open and closed. MacArthur. Okay, give me 1 second. Maybe I'll find it.
John MacArthur, maybe? No, it's a Bible translation.
Oh yeah, got him. Okay. So it's Max Mueller and Max Arthur McAuliffe. 1 second. So these are the guys. There you go.
This guy here?
Yes.
Partial translation of Sikh scripture, Guru Granth Sahib, and history into English.
So again, just a basic story, as every time you have around 1850, some British guys, colonialists, probably Jesuits showing up and giving you the whole translation for all of your religion, you know. So it's always the same story, seeding the culture, it appears.
Wow. So yeah, trying to figure out whether or not that's the accurate translation because we don't have the original. Wow. Great. Yeah, this guy knows. Look at him. He decided he wants to be.
And then always you have these British guys, they always take up then Indian names, you know. So if you wouldn't know, you just read it, you think maybe, oh, he's from there. No, he just arrived 20 years ago, you know, to make up his story, I guess. So something to look into.
Metcalf. Yeah, wow. That's messed up. Yeah, it's hard to know anymore whether or not you're reading the translation or you're reading somebody's fake forged version.
Distorting the religious text, taking the spirituality out of it, and creating those false idols, potentially.
Make sure also you go to Crypto Alchemist on the YouTube and check out his recent videos. You got Energy Earth Tech live with Autodidactic, which was 17 hours ago. I missed it because I passed out. I'm gonna have to watch it.
Yeah, it was actually a really good one, but luckily I got those guys scheduled again for next week. So
we'll get it
meet
done.
them on, and they're making epic orgonites, like pyramids, but with coils in them. They're making the PoE coils, the rodent coils, all of that stuff, and they're going to be part of our agricultural series, testing and growing plants with these different charged waters, with then controlled seeds of regular watered plants as well, of course.
Did you get the messages that Foz sent you, Anderson Foz, on the Messenger?
Yeah, I missed him during the stream, but I've invited him on for next week's episode.
Yeah, we should
100%.
do a thing because he's got some good stuff to talk about. Legit.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover, Raph, before I start the...
Thanks. I think we're good for today. Thank you so much, Andreas. Thank you, Bernie.
Raph is an amazing individual. Go subscribe to his channel. It's live right now as well.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, Auf Wiedersehen. We'll see you guys next time.
Before you hit the ending, before you hit it, are you still on for Woo Wednesday? And you got Ping Trip today? Do you got a plan? Should I invite Tartarian?
I'll hit you up. I'll hit you up in
in
a second. I'm gonna ask Ping Trip what his plan is, if he's gonna make it.
Fair enough, brother. Let me know, and I can invite Shem, see if he can make it. Whatnot.
Cool.
Much love. Thank you so much for letting me hijack stream your epic podcast. Hope I didn't derail.
You were Max Headroom. You know, you're just Max
We're
Headroom.
all over the place today. It's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for
All right.
joining. Thanks
We'll
everyone
talk to
for
you.
listening.
Talk to you guys soon. Hey, Wind Spirit. Peace.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian. Talk Terrier. Recent Talk Terrier. Recent Talk Terrier.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Talk Terriers. Recent Talk Terriers.